So today I'm going to talk about, well, probably the three places that companies most often get stuck in their business model and how to get yourself out of it.
Welcome to the Intentional Success Podcast, where we unpack the top strategies, explore business trends, and drill down into best practices to help your live events production business grow and scale on purpose. I'm your host, Tom Stimson.
Many years ago, back in the 1980s, I wanted to start a rental business. I was doing freelance work as an AV technician. I'm going, this is really cool. And I saw my clients struggling, to source equipment. And, they could always rent it from their competitor, but the fact is they were kind of petty and didn't want to do that. And so if they could find a secondary source of renting equipment, that would be great. And they very often said, hey, why don't you buy some equipment? I'll rent it from you. And in fact, you would often see employees within a company who bought their own equipment and rented it back to the company, even stored it in their warehouse. And while, that's probably an ethical gray area, the fact of the matter is management knows about it and approves of it. It's not. But this is kind of how a lot of companies got started. And so I looked at this. I thought the equipment rental model was really neat. You buy something and people give you money to use it, and then they give it back to you and you get to charge the next person. And rental return rates, ROI on rental, was enormous back in the 1980s. So I, working with some other folks, we actually had somebody who wanted to finance our business, and we started looking at equipment. This is how I learned how to do spreadsheets. I put together models. Here's the equipment we need to buy. Here's how often it would rent, what it would rent for. Was any of that information accurate or correct? I don't know. It was a long time ago. But the fact of the matter is, it was fun. It was really fun to look at how well this could work. I also had to learn about cash flow because I had to, borrow money for that equipment, so I had to pay it back. And, leasing was on the horizon, but generally you had financial backers who invested and they wanted to get paid back. So basically you're getting a loan at high interest rates from a coalition of people who had money. And we found some of that. And it could have worked, except I started asking myself critical questions. What did I really like about this? Well, rental was fun. Making money is cool. I really liked making money. But the fact is, the reason I was in a beginning freelance career was because I like to do shows. And I grew up in the theater doing shows. I worked in a roadhouse and did concerts and Broadway tours and all that kind of stuff. And I liked the feeling of being on headset, contributing to the outcome of the show, performing a technical task or duty or responsibility, and helping. I worked on the fly rail, I ran follow spot, set up slide projectors, all of those things. And in AV, I got to do more of that. Now, were they great shows? No, they were horrible little shows. But that's what I was doing. But this equipment, what would it do for me? So I had to choose between being a freelancer who did shows and being a freelancer who owned rental equipment. And while I didn't use the terminology back then, I understood through my self-exploration that I would end up being a freelancer with gear. And when you're a freelancer with gear, you have two objectives. One is to get on a show, and then two, get some of your gear on it. Sometimes people need your gear, but now you want to get on the show. But what if you're on a show and somebody needs your gear and now you can't get to it? And all of a sudden I started to see this conundrum of that being a freelancer with gear wasn't going to be a great idea. Either I needed to be in the rental business and try and keep this gear moving, keep it repaired, get it delivered, get it picked up, all the things that were required back then, or I needed to be a freelancer and let go of this, what looked like really easy rental money. So that's a pivot point. That's a point where many businesses who get started in event production or AV rentals or sound and lighting rentals or whatever it may be, they first fall in love with either making money, which rental is a great model, or they fall in love with doing shows. And having rental equipment means you get access to more and bigger shows if you have complete systems and complete packages. It doesn't work so well if you have one little tiny piece of the puzzle. If you're the person who owns wireless mics, that's not going to get you a big show. It might get you a rental. It might get you a gig. Okay. But is it going to get you a big show? Not necessarily. So if my goal is to do shows as a freelancer, then rental really wasn't the way to go. Now, there are lots of freelance careers that having equipment makes sense. Video production, videographers, they own a lot of gear. Photographers own a lot of gear. There's people with specialized work that have that equipment. Graphics people own their own computers and creation, on their, manage their own software. So there's a lot of freelancer with gear models that work really well, but they are limited and they won't get you the big shows. They may get you put on a big show from time to time, but often they will also just get you put on the small shows. So if your goal is to do the thing that you love with your gear, a freelancer with gear is a great career. If your goal is to do bigger and bigger shows, a freelancer with gear is not going to get you there. So I learned this early on. I still see it. I still coach people all the time who found themselves in that situation. Maybe after a few years or maybe after decades where they're having to figure out why they can't get to the next level and what's getting in the way. And it's very often somewhere along the way, they didn't make the rental versus show decision to figure out where they fit in. They stuck with the things that they love, which is fantastic. So are you really in love with those things and you need to let go of the stuff that you're not getting to do because of it? Or was there something that you were trying to do that you didn't get to because this other thing got in your way? There's no one answer that's right for everybody. We have to look at everybody's situation differently. Now, suppose we get past that. Suppose we say, hey, we commit to doing shows and now I want to buy gear to do shows. And maybe I start with a specialty. Maybe I start with projection or I start with sound or start with lighting because that's my thing, right? That's the thing that I'm good at. Well, okay, now we have to struggle with, do I want to set up a business that revolves around this? In other words, if I'm an audio company and there's no audio on the show, do I want to look at it even though I have all the other equipment? And we get into those kinds of decisions, but that's okay. We're now in show business and we can pursue the types of shows and the types of clients that are asking us to do the things that we think are valuable and important. So once we're that business, now we're this corporate event staging company, we're making another decision about, do I service rentals as part of my operation or do I only service shows? Now, this is not a binary decision. The fact of the matter is you can do both, but you have to do both consciously because the rental model is a different model than the show model. And it requires a different operation. It requires a different equipment set, different pricing, different marketing. It's a different business. And sometimes we're a show business and we get B2B rentals. We call them sub rentals, cross rentals to other companies like ours. That's not a separate rental business. That's helping out the neighborhood so that somebody's there to help you out when you need them, right? Sometimes we rent stuff from our competitors. And that's, to me, I think that's fantastic. I don't really look at companies as competitors. I look at people who are trying to do similar things, but very often they're not chasing the same customer for the same reason. So yeah, doing some friendly trading, it's always a good thing. But if you're still doing street rentals, end customer rentals, letting the local drama club pick up a projector and a screen, and you're trying to do shows, what operation do you run? Now, I had this decision in my career where I had to help the company I was working for migrate away. We were rental by design while we built the show business. And as the show business took over, we had to de-emphasize rentals. And part of finding the way to do that is another great story, a whole nother podcast. But in the process of doing that, it allowed us to change our operational processes to be more effective for events instead of having to accommodate rentals, which we could have 5 or 10 a day, when what we were trying to do was have 5 or 10 shows a week. So making that decision, are we shows or rental, affected our operation. So as we grew, we made some strong decisions. However, if you don't make that decision, and I see this quite a bit, I think probably particularly in the first 20 years of my consulting practice, I've seen a lot of companies who got to this point and didn't make the choice to eschew rentals and focus on shows. And the way they typically manifest is their operation is underdeveloped. I've got a inventory manager who has no authority on decisions, and I have a bunch of project managers and field techs who come in and, this phrase, pack their own parachute. They prep their own show. So there is no process for prepping a show. There's only experienced people who come in and honestly reinvent the wheel every time they do a show, look around, see what they want to take, see what they think they need, take a little extra, mess up the inventory, leave the warehouse in a shambles, go out and do a show, pack it up, higgledy-piggledy, going, we'll sort it out in the warehouse, send it back, not realizing they're going to another show and somebody else is going to have to sort it out. So the pack your own parachute model is how a lot of companies sustain themselves through this indecision about, are they operationally a show company or a rental company? Because I got a rental warehouse manager who's stuck there behind cleaning up everybody's mess, but also prepping the order for the customer pickups and the small deliveries that go on all of the time. Now, say we've made this decision, okay? Oh, I want to say one more thing about packing your own parachute. It's a phrase that says to me, you are expecting to fail. You're expecting the airplane to fall out of the sky, so you're going to pack your own parachute. Now, I realize in the parachuting world, if I'm jumping out of a plane, I want to be confident that this is packed correctly. Personally, if I'm jumping out of a plane, I prefer the expert pack the parachute for me and make sure I put it on correctly. But the idea that you pack your own parachute says that everybody else is irresponsible. And, we're not jumping out of airplanes and crashing to the ground in our business. Right? We don't have to use life and depth terms to conflate how important what we do is. We simply need to come up with better process. I'd rather have people who are better at packing an order and people who pack orders every single day, check off lists, put systems and kits together, make sure everything's QC'd properly and get it on the truck and get it sent off. I trust those people to get the right gear to show site more than I trust a technician who's going to not think about the things that other people think about. So packing your own parachute to me means that we've reached a point in our careers and our business careers where we need to go back and redecide what business we're in, because packing your own parachute is a Band-Aid. Now, let's say we get there. We've decided, we've dedicated our lives to doing shows. Okay. But if we dedicate our life to doing shows, my operational team suddenly becomes a show team. So the best people to do a show and the best people to plan a show are the same people. So if I do shows for a living, the common denominator is doing shows. So the people that work in operations are show people. And what invariably happens, and this is the next stage of development that I run into, is I've got this great, talented operational team who does all the planning and the prep on the show, and then they go out and do the show. And this company wonders why it has capacity and profitability problems and inconsistent results. And basically, they manage from crisis to crisis. And it's because the people who are preventing crises are out on show site preventing crises instead of preventing the crises on the next job. Right? So they take their most talented people and they use them for too many things. And this creates a spiral. This is really becomes that death spiral in show business, is that our expenses run up because we make expensive mistakes. Our bench isn't deep enough, which means we can't sell as many jobs, which means every job we do sell becomes more important. And we start getting into this Ouroboros of chasing revenue, much of the year, but then not fulfilling it as well as we should, which lowers our profits, lowers our price. We get more desperate. We need more revenue, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And then we keep doing things like, well, we don't want to hire a freelancer, so hey, you're coming out of your office this week and you're going to go do a show, right? That's a big step to get out of. So now we have to make the decision about whether we are in the business of doing shows or are we in the business of getting shows done. And that's where many of you are right now. And that's what I am most singularly focused on right now, is helping you make the transition to a company that plans shows and then executes them. We plan how to get shows done, and then we put a team out there to do the show. And we separate those two aspects of our business so that everyone is working at their highest and best use. And a team that can plan shows, a team that can get shows done, can plan 2, 3, or 4 times more shows than the number of people who are doing both. So if you're planning shows and doing shows, your capacity is obviously limited. So if I want to build a scalable organization that makes money all year round instead of just in the busy months, I need a very small team of talented people who get shows done. And when they're busy, if they need some extra help getting shows done, they can sub in some extra help, get somebody to do drawings. There's all sorts of things you can do. But most of the year, this team is going to be happily working. Even in the months where you are slow, they are busy planning the jobs in the busy months. So we're always ahead of the game. We're always getting a deeper bench. We're not kicking problems down the road because we're really busy doing this big show. People who do shows take care of doing shows. So planning and execution become separate. Now this changes our model again. So we're talking about pivot points, inflection points in the growth of our businesses as we move through. It could be months, years, or decades to get to the point where you have to make some decisions about where do you need to focus your business. Now, at any one of those inflection points, you can table the decision and say, hey, I want to keep the rental business and I also want to be a freelancer. Awesome. They're 2 separate businesses, run them that way, right? I was a freelancer and I also had a business that was staffing shows. Well, I started the staffing business so I'd get more freelance gig, but the fact of the matter is the gigs that were coming through the staffing company were not the type of gigs that I did. So I focused on my own career and hired people to do the staffing business. And they crewed shows and they found people and they built a deep bench. And, we got bigger and bigger year after year. So we have these inflection points. We need to recognize them. We need some help getting through them because you're really firmly entrenched and married to both sides of the equation. You don't want to let either one go. But in your heart of hearts, and if you're listening to me and you're following me, the chances are you're a show person who wants to get shows done. Or if you're that person that wants to do shows, you need a team behind you that gets shows done, that frees you up to go out and do that thing that you love. And that's how we design businesses. So if that's what you're focused on, if this resonates with you and you can see yourself in this, then let's have a conversation. I can help guide you through that process, help you make those decisions and take the steps and introduce you to other people who've been exactly where you are, which of course is priceless. So I hope that gave you some food for thought. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
If you want to find out more about today's episode, go to trstimson.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes, related links, and tons of other valuable resources. If you haven't already subscribed to the Intentional Success Podcast, please do so, and I'd greatly appreciate if you would rate and review the show. Also, if you think you might be a good fit to work together or want more information about the Stimson Group, I'd love to hear from you. Visit trstimson.com for more information.